Tonight, the Dalai Lama has ended his Australian tour with a public conversation in Perth. Special coverage tonight. WA Police Union launched industrial actions after disapproval of wage talks. Thanks for joining us.
Also on DHK News, Hong Kong Chief Executive Donald Tsang visits Australia. And travel chaos for air passengers as volcanic ash circumnavigates.
The Dalai Lama has ended his 10-day visit to Australia in Perth after taking part in public conversation at the Birdsville Theatre. Spirituality in the modern world was the theme of the discussion, and the Dalai Lama also answered questions from the audiences during the discussion.
The Dalai Lama began his 2-day visit to Perth with a public conversation in the Fremantle Town Hall. Hundreds of residents gathered outside and listened to his sharing about spiritual life and experiences. He was greeted by many young residents as he left the town hall.
Thank you. Thank you.
Federal MP for Fremantle, Melissa Park, spoke to us. She was excited that Dalai Lama came to Perth, but felt disappointed that the Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, and Western Australia Premier Colin Barnett did not see His Holiness.
I think if the President of the United States can meet His Holiness, then I don't see why any Australian leader couldn't meet His Holiness. I was very disappointed with the decision by both the Premier and the Prime Minister not to meet him. But, you know, frankly, I think it's their loss.
Today, the Dalai Lama spent his day answering requests from the public and chanting songs by different musicians, after he gave a speech urging people to stay spiritual and change their self-centered view.
About 14,000 people have come here today to see Dalai Lama, and most of them are very excited.
I think he's a great beacon of peace and hope in the world, and I hope we get a message about living a peaceful, compassionate life.
Isabel, Huther, DHK News.
Well, this week's DHK News Facebook poll, we asked you, should Australian Prime Minister Julia Gillard have met the Dalai Lama during his visits to Australia? To voice your opinion, please go to our Facebook fan page at www.facebook.com/HKDLM to tell us what you think. The results will be out next week on the Evening News.
The Western Australian Police Union launched industrial action on Thursday after the board rejected wage increase proposals from the state government. The union is now pushing for a 15% pay rise over the next 2 years and said the industrial actions will not compromise public safety.
The Western Australian Police Union announced the commencement of Phase 1 of their industrial action after reviewing the government's wage proposals and rejecting them unanimously.
The union is still in the negotiation phase and they are waiting for a formal offer from the government. The union has also advised members to adhere strictly to their own produced manuals and regulations until further notice. The Minister for Finance, Commerce and Small Business, Simon O'Brien, said he was looking forward to negotiations being resolved.
I think the rules are clear in terms of our wages policy, and I think if the talks continue as they are, in good faith behind closed doors, we'll reach an outcome soon, and hopefully by the 30th of June, so that police officers get the benefit of any pay rises on and from that date.
However, Labour's police spokesman Margaret Quirk said that the government is not responsive enough and has stressed that the increase in cost of living is taking a toll on the police force.
Conditions shouldn't just be taken away because these are things that other public servants don't have. What the government is trying to do is have a one-size-fits-all for all public service, and all public sector employees are not the same. Nurses are not the same as police, are not the same as teachers. There's a reason why there are separate awards for these different public sector workers, and giving a generic award which doesn't acknowledge the particular stresses and pressures and demands of specific jobs is just very ham-fisted.
Moyukh, Muzahid, DHK News.
Time for national news now. Hong Kong Chief Executive Donald Tsang has begun his visit to Australia. Mr. Tsang has arrived in Melbourne and met with Victoria Premier Ted Baillieu. Both sides have exchanged ideas about business and trading opportunities.
The Chief Executive of Hong Kong, Mr. Donald Tsang, is in Australia to promote trade opportunities and to encourage more Australian companies, particularly resource companies, to list in Hong Kong. At a luncheon hosted by Asia Link in Melbourne, Mr. Tsang praised bilateral ties, calling it a mutually rewarding friendship that continues to flourish. there are over 600 Australian companies operating in Hong Kong, and bilateral trade has been growing at an average annual rate of 4.7% over the last 5 years, with the total value of this trade exceeding $7.6 billion in 2010. And in order to encourage mining companies to list in Hong Kong, the Hong Kong Stock Exchange has recently changed the listing rules for mining companies, resulting in considerable interest from Australian companies looking to raise capital in Hong Kong. While in Melbourne, Mr. Tsang will also meet with Hong Kong students in Melbourne University and visit the Children's Hospital. Shibs away, DHK News.
Just a quick reminder, Hong Kong Chief Executive Donald Tsang will be visiting Perth tomorrow. DHK News English and Chinese channel will have the full coverage of the event, so please do stay with us then.
To some Hong Kong stories now. At least 4 people have died and 19 have been injured in a horrific inferno which happened at To Kwa Wan. The police are still investigating the cause of the fire, and so far they cannot find any evidence that the blaze was linked to arson.
The fire reportedly broke out at about 3 a.m. from the ground floor shop of the 8-story block on Ma Tau Wai Road. It took firefighters at least 2 hours to contain the blaze. 2 women and 2 children were dead because of the tragedy. Many of the flats in the building were said to be subdivided into several units housing different families. District councillors say the building did not have an owner or management aid committee. A resident told the media that the stairway were often obstructed by rubbish. More than 40 families have evacuated from the building, and the Security of Welfare Matthew Jones said the government would do everything to help. The police and the fire department are investigating the cause of the blaze. William Mann, DHK News in Hong Kong.
Hong Kong adult residents will still have to wait for 5 months before they can collect the $6,000 handout from the government. The proposal has suggested that the elderly should be the first to receive money from the $38 billion scheme, and other age groups should be registered in phase starting from August. Young people who reached 18 before the deadline on March 31st next year will be eligible. Officials believe the funding could be approved by the Legislative Council next month.
The eruption of the volcano in Chile on June the 4th that disrupted air travel across much of the southern hemisphere continues to affect travellers, as the plume of ash that resulted from the eruption began to circumnavigate the globe.
Thousands of travellers were thrown into chaos when flights were cancelled to and from Melbourne, Perth and Adelaide airports, with some flights resuming on the 13th of June, with aircraft flying under the plume. Many travellers are still stranded, however, as airlines have cancelled flights due to safety fears for their aircrafts, which can suffer catastrophic damage if the planes fly through the ash. The Volcanic Ash Advisory Centre in Darwin is tracking the ash as it moves through the atmosphere. Travel delays are expected to continue as the plume begins to circulate the globe for the second time. Blake Curtis, DHK News.
Time to join Richie with all the latest sports news.
And the under-17 Socceroos have defeated Uruguay in a friendly match.
Exactly, Uruguay was leading the first half of the match with 1 point, but the Aussies managed to change their gameplay in the second half. The Australian team successfully maintained their ball possession, and striker Dylan Tombites scored 2 world-class goals, bringing them to victory. Coach Jan Velslegen said the team created a lot of opportunities in the second half of the game, which resulted in their victory. Jaime Alaswari conquered the streets in the Hong Kong Redbull Dragon Run. The race car driver commented that the roads were narrow, but nevertheless he enjoyed it. This was Hong Kong's first Formula One experience.
Obviously it was for a show run, so it was a bit too narrow, but it was good. It was good enough, and the safety was good, the people, the crowd, everything was okay.
And a quick reminder for tomorrow night's NRL match will be the Sea Eagles versus the Eels at the Brookvale Oval in Sydney at 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. Fox Sports 2 will broadcast the match live. That's all the sports. Have a great evening. Ivan, Anna.
Thank you, Richie, and that's how the world looks tonight.
We'll see you next week. Good night.
Good night.